Hello, my name is Jeff, and this is the new for 2025 Mazda CX-70. And to be honest with you, I don't really know why it exists. I mean, it's essentially identical to the currently existing Mazda CX-90, with the exception that the CX-70 doesn't get a third row. Yes, the CX-90 offers more trim levels, but the trims they do share are the exact same price, starting at $41,000, and even feature the exact same engine options across the board. Sure, there are some cosmetic differences, but the biggest changes are perhaps in favor of the CX-70. As a newer vehicle introduced for 2025, it has newer Mazda tech in it that the CX-90 didn't get, having debuted in 2024. I'm sure it'll come to the CX-90 eventually, but currently the CX-70 has that up over the CX-90, just the third row exception. So that begs the question, why did they build this? Well, I don't know, but in this video, I'll take you through the exterior, the interior, the powertrain, and of course, we'll take it for a drive. So getting right into it, here is the key to the CX-70. This is the same Mazda key we've been seeing for a while now. Of course, you have keyless entry and stuff like that, so it's not as critical. Now, moving on to the vehicle itself, this one is one of the higher trims, as is usual with the press cars. So you're looking at a Turbo S with the Premium Plus package. This one has equipped as around $58,000. So a lot of what you'll be seeing here is the top of the line options for the CX-70. Now, moving on, there's some other cool changes. Just the exterior is going to be different from the CX-90. As I mentioned earlier, there are some cosmetic differences to instantly tell what you're looking at. In some cases, the CX-70 is offered with very exclusive colors. I believe there's 3 colors total. This one is polymetal gray metallic, which is one of those colors that is only offered for the CX-70, in the same way that the CX-90 has some colors that are exclusive to it that cannot be found on the CX-70. The other big change is actually the trim. So if we take a look here, you might have noticed all of this black gloss trim on the front and a lot of these other darker details, and that's going to be how you tell if you're looking at a CX-70, because the CX-90 is actually offered with a lighter sort of chrome brightwork, and that's how you can really tell the difference between the two. Otherwise, dimensionally, they are the same vehicle. I mean, you can tell just the whole profile and everything is identical. Now, taking a look at the front here, there's a lot of good Mazda tech, adaptive headlights, LED lights, you can see all the turn signals, a lot of cool integrated features. I really like the styling for these vehicles. I think it's quite sharp. It's really mature looking. It's not boy racer or anything like that. Nice long hood, so you could fit that straight 6, which is a newer powertrain introduced in 2024 for Mazda, now here for the new for 2025 CX-70. As we move to the side here, we have a double wishbone suspension setup in the front with a multi-link setup in the back, which is a great suspension choice. On top of that, there are some other cool changes like these wheels, for example. These are more premium wheels. These are the 21-inch wheels. I think they look quite sharp. Standard's going to be 19 inches for the CX-70. This is nice because some manufacturers go way too big on their wheel choices. You'll see 22s or even 24s, and that can ruin some of your ride quality. I think by sticking with the 21s, it's not getting too out of hand, even though they are on the bigger side. Moving over here, we have the inline 6. Obviously, this is available in the hybrid or the inline 6 powertrains. We'll talk about that more in a sec. Nice power folding mirrors. These are an incredibly cool luxury feature, power adjustable, heated, etc. As far as keyless entry goes, you only get it on the front 2 doors. Whenever I see something with 4 doors, especially if it's a little bit more on the luxury side, I'd prefer to see it on all 4 doors, but at least we have it on both sides of the vehicle. You, of course, get these nice black roof rails to mount some roof equipment if you need. You get a sunroof as well, tinted glass in the back, which is a nice privacy feature, and the overall styling is just pretty sharp. You know, it has this really cool silhouette as you look at the vehicle. One of the biggest gas fillers I've ever seen on a vehicle. I mean, here's my hand for scale, about 6 foot even. It's a fairly sizable gas cap. Black spoiler in the rear. This particular vehicle actually has the power lift hatch, so you can go ahead and lift it. It's also got the motion activated sensors as well if you wanted to use it that way, if your hands are full of groceries, for example. And looky here in the back, here is all of that big storage, which this storage, again, there's no third row, so all of this stays fitted the way you see. The funny part to me is that all the cup holders and stuff that would have come from the CX-90 for the third row compartment are all still in here, so that's kind of an interesting design change. Clearly, these parts are all shared with the CX-90, but you won't really use them that much here in the CX-70. You still have some of the cool folding features here. Of course, we have some outlets to use. You got the back hatch open. but plenty of storage space in here, which is going to be identical to a 2-row version of the CX-90, or even if you fold down the 3rd row for the CX-90 as well. So kind of interesting the way those changes are, but nonetheless, LED taillights in the back, everything is just as sharp. The CX-70 badge, another pretty significant change, I suppose, compared to the CX-90. but really they're very identical, similar vehicles with some slight cosmetic differences. Taking a look under the hood of the CX-70, the engine options are the exact same for the CX-90. We get this engine cover, which hides our engines. Of course, there is a hybrid 4-cylinder option for both vehicles. You can even hang this little engine hood using this yellow piece here, which just flips around. And here we actually have one of the 2 engine options for the straight 6. The standard straight 6 is good for 280 horsepower, and this one, being the higher trim model, has the higher output turbocharged 3.3 liter straight 6, good for 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, and also happens to be a mild hybrid using that 48 volt architecture. I think this is an incredibly unique engine that of course made its debut in 2024 on the CX-90, but features all the same options here for the CX-70 and produces quite a lot of power, more than the average for the class certainly, and should have no problem moving you uphill, and you can even tow up to 5,000 pounds, which is very cool. Now this engine comes paired with an 8-speed automatic transmission, which sends power to all 4 wheels via Mazda's iActive all-wheel drive, which actually has a rear-wheel drive bias, meaning it sends most of the power to the rear wheels instead of evenly split between the front and the rear. And that's done for performance reasons. Mazda, a company which builds sporty vehicles but also has a history in motorsports, it's cool to see that they make decisions like that to make for more interesting to drive vehicles. Now, of course, power and performance is all great, but that's not the only thing people care about. You're probably going to be dailying this vehicle, so we have to talk fuel economy. This thing is rated for 23 miles per gallon city, 28 miles per gallon highway, and 25 miles per gallon combined. And given that this one has the larger 19.6 gallon fuel tank, you're looking at about 490 miles of range, which is really good. And obviously that also depends on how you drive it. If you enjoy your speed, which this thing is plenty fast, I think it's 0 to 60 times going to be around the 6-second range, which is crazy fast, then you're going to have a hard time keeping out of it. But if you can keep out of it, I can say from my experience, you're certainly going to get close to 28 miles per gallon while driving this thing around the city, doing mixed driving in the city and the highway. And that is great news as far as the drivability for this vehicle. If you want to do your own maintenance, everything here is readily accessible. Obviously being able to hang this, there's some cool engineering choices in here, but everything is pretty easy to access. The only concern might be that mild hybrid system, but for the most part, it's all pretty standard here as far as working on the vehicle if you wanted to do that yourself, or you can just leave it to Mazda, whatever you want to do. Moving on to the interior of the CX-70, good Lord, this thing is gorgeous. Just look at all of the textures, the materials, Napa leather trim seats. I love the different changes here. We have this Alcantara microfiber-like interior, the quilted stitching, the stripe, the steering wheel made of leather, of course the big screen. I love, again, more of that microfiber Alcantara style material across. This is a good looking interior. Mazda takes a lot of pride in the way they design it and make it very ergonomic, and of course the CX-70 is no exception. But first, before we get too far into all the technology here in the CX-70, we have to hop in the back. So now we're sitting in the back of the Mazda CX-70, and as you can see here, I have plenty of headroom. I am 6 foot even for reference, and I have no problem sitting back here. I mean, even look at my legroom. With the seat set up for me, I have plenty of room between my knees and the back of the driver's seat. So obviously this will be able to fit adults even in the second row. If you go for the CX-90, you get the third row. That's not going to be as big, but of course here in the CX-70, you could fit adults front or back, seats a total of 5, and quite comfortably, I might add. There's also a various amount of amenities back here, which does depend on what trim you go with. Starting with the front here, this one has 3-zone climate control. We even get heated seats here in the back, and you can see all of our controls, USB Type-C chargers, and even some vents which go out the back. Now, the key thing to point out here is this one does have the bench seat in the middle, so we only get the heated seats. If you go for the captain's chairs option, which minimizes how many people you can actually fit, then you can actually get heated and ventilated seats in the second row. But this one has the bench seat, so you only get heated seats. You do get cool things like these window shades. You even get a light back here, which is quite a nice luxury feature, and the same interior quality and trim. So it's really a very, very nice back seat. If you haul adults, your family, your kids, whatever the case is, this is really, really nice back here. So now we're back in the front seat, and taking a look at this interior, it's quite nice. It's clear that Mazda put a lot of effort out into the design. It looks good, but it is identical to what you'll find in the CX-90. The main difference being there are some different leather color choices between the two, but that really shouldn't decide which one you decide to go with. Now that being said, let's get into it. We have 2 digital displays here, one for the driver gauge cluster, one in the center, and we even get a heads-up display, which is great because that means you don't have to take your eyes off the road, and that'll show you your navigation, your cruise control settings, even stop sign and sort of sign recognition software, which is very, very cool. Moving on to what's in front of the driver here, nice leather wrapped steering wheel. In fact, all of the leather touch points, including your shifter and armrests, are all leather wrapped seats, very luxurious in this vehicle, and the ergonomics are good. The steering wheel in particular is quite comfortable. Now on here, we actually have our adjustable digital display here, which we can toggle through our information, so you can decide what you want to post. You can even see a lot of your standard displays that are available for whatever you want to look at, really. The steering wheel has a lot of integrated buttons, including things like our cruise control and driver assist that can be adjusted. There are paddle shifters on the back for manual shifting. And if we use the sport button over here to do our drive select modes, you actually have normal as standard, which I imagine most people will use. You have a sport mode, which actually turns the gauge cluster all red, which is kind of a cool feature. What that's going to do, it's going to adjust the all-wheel drive system as it needs to, and it's going to make the car feel more responsive and keep the revs up. And then you also have the off-road mode, which is kind of the same, but obviously more so in an off-road focused environment. Now taking a look at the other tech, we have some buttons here on the left side for a lot of our parking assist controls, traction controls, our memory settings for our power adjustable seats, and even the rear hatch pop, which is always nice. And in the door, you have a lot of your standard tech, nice textures and materials throughout, and everything feels quite solid. You won't find any rattles in here. Moving on to our next display, this does of course have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, navigation, Bluetooth connectivity, all that type of stuff. And in Mazda fashion, it is actually not a touchscreen. You have to use the physical buttons here in the center to control it, which Mazda swears by as being a safer way to operate the vehicle. If you're not familiar with this system, I will tell you that it can be a little bit clunky at first. There are some big buttons key for jumping between navigational wise, but you'll get used to it quite quickly. Again, below that, we have our climate control system here, which is a lot of physical buttons, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. I love to see physical buttons personally. We do have heated and ventilated seats in the front here with a heated steering wheel. You'll note that there are two different settings here. It's dual zone here in the front with a third zone for the second row. We do have a Qi wireless charger, some plugins. This very smooth device here is actually for our cup holders, which is quite nice. I love how smoothly it all works. We have the shifter here, which is in fact a physical shifter for our 8-speed automatic transmission. We have hill descent control, our camera control, of course, which will show us this. And you can see it's got the navigation tech as well to lead and guide the wheels as you need, which is always a great feature. Below that, we have this cool split armrest. The idea being you could open one side while resting your arm if you need to gain access. It's not actually that deep because it has to make room for the vents to exit out for that second row. But you do have some USB Type-C chargers in there and some additional storage if you need it. Up high, more storage, more lights, our auto-dimming mirrors all around, and of course a Bose speaker system, which is a 12-speaker system in this car, and Bose has a good relationship with Mazda for powering a lot of these vehicles. It looks pretty good. It's clear that it's a very unique interior that feels special to be in the vehicle. It's just identical to the CX-90, so you can expect a similar experience for both vehicles, but is pretty good all in all. The infotainment system is Mazda's traditional system that's been around for a while now. It's not the greatest, but it's also not the worst. Obviously, CarPlay connectivity if you need it. So that's a quick look at the interior. Incredibly loud turn signals here in the CX-70. But anyways, what's it like to drive the CX-70? Wow, that gets really loud once you're underway. But it moves really, really good. So obviously there's no shortage of power with this thing. That's straight 6 in the top trim. 340 horsepower is plenty, I would say well above average for the market segment. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of SUVs with a lot of power these days. Obviously, if you get the hybrid version, you're going to lose some of that oomph that might help when going up hills, or if you're going to be towing or even carrying a lot of cargo in your SUV. Those are all important things to consider when deciding what powertrain to go with. But just for the CX-70 as a whole, well, it's obviously very similar to the CX-90. Visibility is really good, high up SUV seating. The A-pillars are a little bit thick, but I don't think they really block your view that much. The interior itself is very comfortable, especially the steering wheel. You know, Mazda puts a lot of effort into their ergonomics, which I think really stands out. Even as far as their steering and everything goes, they try to make these cars a little bit more engaging. I will say this, however, in my time driving the car, while it is incredibly smooth, it minimizes a lot of the outside noise, but not everything. That engine noise can be a bit jarring if you're not ready for it. We can actually take it out of the sport mode here too, which should quiet down the engine a little bit, shift down out of gears. But you know, it's It almost feels jerky at times. I think it has to do with the transmission not being totally happy as to what gear it wants to be in, and then the auto start stop's not the most intuitive. It's not the worst one I've ever experienced, but it's also not great, and you don't even save that much in terms of total fuel economy, so you may want to just shut that off. But otherwise, I really like the interior. It's incredibly comfortable. It's pretty easy to use. It has Mazda's sort of physical infotainment controls, as we pointed out earlier, which might not be everybody's thing. That can be a little bit jarring at first until you get used to it, but you will get used to it, I promise, and then you won't have any issues navigating through it. But all in all, everything's actually quite good with this vehicle. It's actually a really comfortable road trip vehicle as well. It takes a lot of the bumps quite well. The heads-up display is a nice thing to have, and it just really feels like you're in command of the vehicle. It's got a nice wrap-around you sort of feeling that makes it feel very easy to park, very easy to drive, keep in the lanes, etc. And so there's a lot of good things to say about the vehicle overall. I mean, I think a lot of people who buy these are going to enjoy them. There's just some things that I think could be a little bit improved here and there, and I am confidently saying that I think Mazda will be able to fine-tune a lot of this and make this vehicle better with time. But out of the box, this is quite an interesting development as this new platform, which we saw debut with the CX-90, and now is essentially here in the CX-70, which is a little bit of an awkward stepchild, being that it's essentially a CX-90 but without the third row, so you just have all of that storage now. But as far as the driving's concerned, I think it is basically like a lot of the other SUVs for sale, maybe a bit more interesting in terms of the interior and some of the steering feedback from the vehicle. But then of course it has way more power with that very unique straight six powertrain if you opt to go for that route. Obviously there's the lower power, which is still a lot of power for this vehicle, and even the hybrid, but that's what it's like. So there you have it. That is a quick look at the new for 2025 Mazda CX-70, a vehicle which I don't understand why it exists. I mean, it's essentially identical to the CX-90 with a variety of different changes. I mean, they're literally the same price across the board. So if you're asking yourself, which one do you buy? Well, the way I see that is whichever one is providing the most value to you. Obviously, if you need a third row, you have to choose the CX-90. But if you don't need a third row, I would just choose whichever one offers the best value at the trim you're looking for. If one's on sale and one's not, then buy the one that's on sale. They're identical vehicles. If anything, the CX-70 has a leg up over the CX-90 currently because it has newer Mazda technology. Again, I'm sure that tech will make its way into the CX-90, but it's not currently in it, and so that gives the CX-70 a slight advantage. If you don't need a third row, maybe look for a CX-70. But being as it's the newer model, you can probably get an existing deal on a CX-90 that might be sitting on a lot somewhere if they're having a hard time moving it. So I think it all just depends on what's giving you the best value at the dealership, because they're basically identical vehicles. Yes, there are some cosmetic changes outside of the third row in terms of different wheels or colors, but those really shouldn't be the sole determining factors that tells you what vehicle you buy. I would just look whatever provides the best value for you and your use case. With that, that is the end of the video. I want to hear what you think about the CX-70 using the comments down below. If you could leave me a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it, and consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.